Hello everyone and welcome back to the Coding Amateur. So in this series we are going to install Coolify on a VPS, and then we are going to install our back-end services, which would be PostgreSQL or database, Redis, which is our cache server, and also our Directus instance. But before we could do that, we would need to get a VPS. Now, you can purchase a VPS from any hosting provider of your choice. I am using Hostinger, and I am really pleased with the service thus far. I am not sponsored by Hostinger. This is just my personal preference. And one of the things I like about Hostinger is they use SDD drives instead of the HDD drives, which makes their service faster, and the overall performance I think is good. I have not had a lot of experience with others, so I'm not here to say that it is the best, but I am satisfied with it so far. Okay, so you can use whatever hosting provider you want. I'm going to use Hostinger, and it naturally shows which one is the fastest, I believe. So I'm just going to click next. Okay, and for our VPS, the OS I'm going to choose is Ubuntu. Now I could choose, if you look closely, you'll see plain OS, Docker application control panel. If you go to control panel, you will see Coolify. So if I click on Coolify, it's going to install my Ubuntu OS with Coolify on it. So I could do that and it would speed things up, But for those of you who may not be using Hostinger, and the hosting provider you may be on may not offer Coolify out of the box. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to choose Ubuntu, which is the normal OS, and then I'm going to manually install Coolify. All right. So my choice now, you can go with the 2404 LTS. I'm going to try the 2604 based on my reading. This is a fresh install. I'm going to try the 2604. That's the newest OS, so I'm going to go with that one. So I'm going to just click select. I'm just going to click on generate, copy the root password, and then I'm going to click next. Okay. So now that I have my root password, do I want malware scanner? This is free, so I'm going to click on that. I don't need any other paid services. I'm just going to take the free malware scanner, and I'm going to go to next, and it's going to show me the different options. Because this is a tutorial, I'm not really using it in production. I'm not going to choose the higher packages. I'm going to choose the basic. For 24 months, you get it at $649. I'm just going to take it at a month-by-month basis, and I'm going to click complete payment, and it's processing my payment. Okay, so now that we have our VPS set up, before we could look at adding our domain name to that particular VPS, we need to access our VPS, and I'm going to use an SSH client known as Termius. You could use again whatever SSH client you want. I find Termius to be very easy to use and I like it, so I use Termius. By the way, I am on Zorin OS. That's my operating system, so I'm on a Linux based system. For Windows, you may have a different SSH client, and the same for if you are on a Mac. So I'm using Termius. I have to copy my IP address. I'm going to click on new host. When I click on new host, I'm going to paste my IP address here. My username is going to be root, and I must paste my password. So I'm going to go for my password, and I'm going to copy my password and then I am going to paste that in, and I'm going to click on connect. Now, I also want to put a label, so I want to give my host a name. I will just put demo VPS. Yeah, I'll put demo VPS. Okay. All right. And I am going to click connect. And it's going to ask me, do I want to add it to the list of known hosts? And I'm going to click add and continue. And I am connected to my VPS. And right now I'm connected as root. Now let's harden our VPS. There are 4 simple steps that we can take to secure it. First, we're going to disable the root user. Second, we're going to enable our firewall. Thirdly, we are going to change the default port for SSH. And last but not least, we are going to install fail to ban. Before we implement these steps on the VPS, I want to explain why we are doing what we are about to do, especially for those who may not have configured a VPS before. So let's start with the first step. The root user is public knowledge. Every single Linux server in the world has an account named root. Because hackers already know this username, they only have to guess your password or exploit one single vulnerability to take control of your server. Creating a custom username forces hackers to guess both a unique username and a password, which is significantly harder to break. It also guardrails against accidental destruction. The root user operates without any safety nets. If you run a destructive command by accident while logged in as root, the server will execute it instantly without asking questions. It also protects you against automated bots. The moment your VPS goes online, malicious automated bots will start scanning its IP address. These bots constantly bombard the root user with thousands of automated password guesses per minute, known as a brute force attack. By disabling root login entirely, you immediately render all of those automated attacks completely useless. Next, our firewall. Why do we need a firewall? Well, first, it blocks brute force attacks. Automations constantly guess passwords on exposed ports. A firewall shuts down unneeded entry points. It also restricts open ports. Database engines like MySQL or internal tools stay hidden from the public internet. Our firewall also limits protocol access. You can restrict sensitive services like SSH to only accept connections from your specific home or office IP address. Our third step, change the default SSH port from 22 to something obscure. The reality is that the moment a VPS gets a public IP, automated bots start hammering port 22 within minutes. They are not targeted attacks, just scripts scanning the entire internet looking for a default SSH port to brute force. Moving to port, for example, 2222 or any non-standard port makes you invisible to those dumb scanners. The security community calls this security through obscurity and generally considers it a weak standalone measure. But combined with the real hardening, SSH keys, no password or fail to ban, it's a cheap quality of life improvement that keeps your logs clean. Lastly, we want to look at or implement fail to ban. Now, what is fail to ban? Fail to ban is a tool that scans log files for suspicious activity like excessive failed login attempts and blocks potentially harmful IP addresses. This free service protects Linux systems from brute force attacks by temporarily rejecting IPs exhibiting suspicious behavior, thereby reducing the risk of unauthorized access. So, having discussed our 4 steps, we will now implement them on our VPS. Now that we have discussed the 4 steps, let's implement them. So our first step would be to create a new user, which would be a sudo user, log out from a root user, log in as the sudo user, and then disable the root account. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, so let's get started. So let's clear and let's add our new user. And the command is simple: add user, and let's give a user a name. For this task, I'm going to just use demo. Of course, I would not encourage you to use demo. Just for this tutorial, I'm going to use demo, but I will change it eventually. So let's hit enter, and it's asking me for a password for this user. All right, and I have to re-enter the password. Okay, so we have our new user created, and it's asking us for bio information. I'm just going to hit enter. I'm not going to put in anything, and I'm just going to click yes, and that's it. But we need to add this user to the sudo group. Now, if we check what groups our user belongs to by typing in groups and our user, which is demo, you would see that it belongs to demo and users, right? We want to add it now to our user group. How are we going to do that? This is the command. User mod, and we're going to add a flag, right? Now in Linux, flags modify the behavior of commands. Now we are going to use -ag. Now we could have also written this as -a -g, but we can group them together and just put -o -ag. All right. So the capital G flag tells Linux to add demo to the sudo group. But what this modification does, it replaces the other groups that demo belongs to. So as you see on the screen, demo belongs to a demo group and the users group. It's going to replace those two and with the sudo group. So we are going to lose those other 2 groups. We don't want that behavior. So we use another modifier, which is the -a. The -a tells Linux to append this new group to the list of groups that demo belongs to. All right. So with that said, let's continue sudo, and we're going to put our user, which is demo, and hit enter. Now, if we just use the up arrow to cycle through our commands and we come back to groups demo, you would see that the sudo group is also added. Okay, so we now have our sudo user. What we are going to do, we are going to log out. So I'm just going to do exit, exit, right? And I'm going to my terminal. I'm going to change my login credentials to the sudo user. Okay, and I'm going to log back in. All right, so we are back in, and you will see that we are logged in as demo, right? Let's clear. And now I want to disable the root account. Now you can also disable the password or lock the password for the root account. So I will show you that command. So you can use sudo password passwd -l. That flag is to lock, and we're going to lock the root password for the root. Okay, now if we hit enter, it's going to ask for a password. This is the password for our sudo user, which in my case is demo. Right, and we have changed the password. So let's check to see if the password is indeed locked. So it's sudo password. This time the flag is capital S and root, and we hit enter, and that output tells us that the password is locked. Okay, so if you try to log in as your root, you would not be able to get into it. All right, so you can test that. Let's move on. I want to disable the root logging, so we have to go to the sshd config file. All right, so how do we do that? Sudo again, and we are going to use a text editor known as Nano. I find it easier to use than Vim. That may not be your preference, but that's mine. We are going to go to the etc folder followed by the SSH folder and then the SSHD config file. Okay, and hit enter. Now be very careful in this file. You do not want to modify any of the commands, the command or the lines of code here. What we want to do is we want to change permit root login to no. So scrolling right down to the bottom, we find permit root login and we're going to change yes to no. In Nano, to write is Control O. It's going to ask you to confirm you want to write to the file and you hit enter. And then we exit by Control S. If you're on a Mac, it may be Command O and Command X. Okay, and that's it. We have successfully created our sudo user and also disabled the root account. Okay, next we want to enable our firewall. So we want to open up a few ports that we will need. So the first port we need to open is our SSH port. So let's do sudo UFW allow, and we're going to type in open SSH, right? SSH, and we're going to hit, oh, that's an E, mistype, that's to W, right? Open SSH, right? You could easily have used the command sudo UFW allow 22/TCP. I will show you that command in action, right? Okay, so we have updated the firewall. Let's add another command. This time we want to allow port 80. So sudo UFW allow, and if you remember, port 80 is used by HTTP. So we could easily just add in HTTP. So sudo UFW allow HTTP, and that would open up port 80. We also want to open up our HTTPS port, which is 443. So now I'll use the command using the port number. So sudo UFW allow HTTPS is what we would have put, and if we hit enter, it would accept that PS. But instead of doing that, this time we're going to use 443/TCP, which is the protocol it uses. Okay, and we hit enter, and it has been registered. So now let us enable our firewall. So sudo UFW enable, hit enter, and yes, we want to proceed. Right, so firewall is active and enable on system startup, which is very important, so that if we should reboot the server, we want the firewall to come up automatically. Now let's check the status of our firewall. Sudo UFW and status, or status, depending on how you pronounce it, verbose. All right, and you would see that our status, it is active. All right, and you would see all of the ports that are open. So we have port 2222/TCP. That port is allowed. We have 22, which is the open SSH, and we have port 80 and port 443. Now you notice that there is a duplication. One would be for IP version 4, and the other set is for IP version 6. Okay, now you would notice that there's a strange port 2222. So in our next step, we will talk about that a little more. All right, but for now, our firewall is up and it is running. Okay, so let's move on now to our next step. Our next step would be to change our SSH port to something obscure. Now I'm going to use 2222, and we would add this port in the same way we added the HTTPS, right? So if you just again use the up arrow and scroll through your commands, you would see this command here. I could easily just change this to 2222, hit enter, and that would allow me to enter the new port I want to use for my SSH port. Sorry. Now we have to make the changes within our SSHD config file. So again, I'm going to scroll using the up arrow, which makes it easier to go back to that command. This is it. I'm going to go to this file, hit enter, and I'm going to look for line port 22. Now it's right here, but it's disabled. I want to enable it, which I have done here, and I'm going to use 2222, and I'm going to hit Control O to write, enter to confirm, and then Control X. Okay, that's it. Now I want to reload the server, sudo, not the server, sorry, I want to reload the firewall. So sudo UFW reload. I'm going to hit enter, and the firewall is reloaded, and I'm going to do a system restart, right? And I'm going to restart the SSHD. Okay, and let's hit enter, right? Okay, so now that we have changed our port to 2222, I've changed my port to 2222. I'm going to try to connect on the old SSH port, which is 22. So if I click connect, you will notice that I am not able to connect to the VPS. It's just spinning and nothing is happening. So I'm just going to leave it a little while just to make sure, and just so that you guys could see that I cannot connect on port 22. Okay, so I'm going to close this connection. I'm going to change my port to 22 here, and let me add, and let me click connect. And now you see that I can connect on the new port that I would have changed the default to. All right, and let's click clear. So we have successfully changed our port number, which will help us to eliminate some of the noise on or in our log file. Lastly, we want to install fail to ban. Okay, so here's the command. Before we install fail to ban, we want to update our system. So let's go sudo apt update, hit enter, and we have to put in our sudo password. Right, I'm going to hit enter, and we are updating. Okay, so that's finished. Let's install fail to ban. Now we are using the -y flag, and Y stands for yes. Now in this installation, there will be a few times it will stop and ask for you to confirm that you want to install a particular package or you want to do a particular thing, and you have to type Y and then hit enter. To avoid having to do that, or to avoid the pause that would occur within the installation, you put the flag -y, and that will just say yes to everything, and it will completely install automatically. Only do this with packages that you are 100% sure about. All right, I'm sure about fail to ban, so I'm going to hit yes. Okay, and it's done. All right, so we have implemented our 4 steps. We have successfully created a new user, a sudo user, and disabled the root account. We would have enabled our firewall. We would have changed our VPS, our SSH port, and we would have installed fail to ban. So these are basic steps that we took to harden our VPS. Next, we will install Coolify. So see you in the next video.